The first morning I decided to act dumb. The elevator was stuck on 12 for 8 full minutes. By the time the doors finally opened on 18, I had rehearsed my expression in the mirrored chrome. Eyebrows slightly knit, lip tucked like I was thinking hard, a look that said eager but overwhelmed. I hated it even before I stepped out into the open office. I've spent most of my life trying to prove I'm the smartest person in the room, and there I was about to pretend I couldn't find the room at all. It wasn't the plan I had when I joined Ashford and Leeds. Back then, my plan was embarrassingly sincere. Do good work, be useful, send detailed emails that people would save, get promoted on schedule. I'm a forensic accountant, which sounds sexier than it is. Most days it's spreadsheets and emails and a nose for numbers that don't add up. My mom still tells people I work with crimes, and I let her. It's easier than saying I stare at ledgers until they confess. Our team's manager, Corey, was the kind of person who uses names like knives. Kiddo, he'd say to me even though I'm 31. His eyebrows were never not arched. He carried an air of permanent exasperation, like he'd been forced to work with a collection of talented pets. When I joined, he'd onboarded me by walking me around the floor with his hand hovering near my back, never actually touching, just implying ownership. "This is Jules," he'd said. "She's on the Thornwell account now. Sharp kid, still getting oriented." He said oriented like a diagnosis. Thornwell Manufacturing was our firm's messiest client. Rumors had been floating for months. Something about inflated work-in-progress numbers, sudden write-downs, inventory that seemed to multiply whenever auditors came around. There were whispers that Corey had saved the relationship by keeping the audit team happy without digging too deeply. People said it with admiration, like a magician who could saw a woman in half without getting blood on his tie. Over time, I noticed the pattern Corey liked best. He'd take credit for anything shiny, and when something was dull or inconvenient, he'd toss it like a frisbee toward whoever was closest, then bark ownership as if that were a compliment. His emails were full of phrases like circle back, low lift, and friendly reminder. He sent friendly reminders like some people breathe. He also had this flea market manager habit of CCing everyone's boss when he praised or chastised you, spraying attention like raid. The day everything shifted was a Tuesday in April, the kind of day that sits in the middle of the week like a doorstop. I found a discrepancy in Thornwell's Q4 numbers that made my stomach go cold. A neat little dance between inventory and COGS that created profit out of thin air. It wasn't a smoking gun so much as a smell of smoke. Nothing I could take to the ethics line yet, but enough to know someone had candles burning in a closet. I brought it to Corey because that was the process, though a truer sentence is, I brought it to Corey because I still wanted to believe process mattered. He was eating almonds at his desk, crunching like he was mad at them. I explained what I'd found, sliding a printout across the table. He scanned it with the attention span of a toddler in a museum. He said. "Yeah, let's not make a federal case. Thornwell's CFO has been through a divorce, okay? Brutal one. Numbers are getting cleaned up this quarter. We don't do gotcha accounting." My chest tightened. It's not gotcha. It's got something. It's material. That word is our line in the sand. He snapped the folder shut. Material once legal says it is. We're not the SEC, sweetheart. I let the sweetheart roll off my back and watched it shatter on the floor. Should we at least flag it for an internal review? Corey's smile didn't reach his eyes. We're flagging it by noting it for our ongoing monitoring. See? Flagged. He tapped the folder like a blessing, then slid it back across to me. This is a great learning moment, Jules. Your job isn't to jump at shadows. Your job is to build relationships and make sure our clients feel safe. Safe. Like that word had one meaning. I took the folder, nodded, and walked back to my desk feeling like the floor had tilted. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything but the arithmetic lodged under my skin, an itch I couldn't scratch. By 5, Corey had CC'd half the leadership team on a shout-out for me for proactive monitoring on Thornwell. I stared at the email, at the line where my name sat like an ornament on his narrative, and felt something snap. That night I called my brother, who always gives advice like he's a bartender in a movie. "You have 3 options," he said. "Play along and rot. blow the whistle and pray, or play dumb and document until he falls into his own hole. I hate all those options. He shrugged through the phone. Pick the one that keeps you paid and lets you sleep. The following week, Corey called a war room meeting. War room means everyone brings laptops and a willingness to give up their lunch. He put me on a subtask he called Supplier Variance Trend Visualization, which is exactly as thrilling as it sounds. Just big picture it, he said. Make it vibes. He said vibes about a chart. I wanted to cry from the violence of it. That was the morning I walked into the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror, and practiced the soft focus expression of someone who tries hard and doesn't quite get it. I decided I would say, "Can you walk me through that?" more times than any adult should. I would confuse silly acronyms. I would ask for context and ask for it again, and I would write everything down. It felt like swallowing sand. I've been good at math since the age it was called numbers. I like the click of a puzzle when it fits. Pretending not to know was like pretending not to breathe. But I had a mission now. Make Corey explain on the record. Make Corey own the decisions he made in rooms without me. At first, my act was small. Wait, when we say normalize for month-end adjustments, are we also including inventory reclass entries? I asked, pen poised. He sighed, explained in a way that made him sound like the professor he'd wanted to be. I repeated his words back to him and watched him nod. At another meeting, I asked, should we alert the audit team to the delta we saw in December, or are we planning to post an adjusting entry before they review? He waved a hand. We'll just saddle next quarter. They won't care. I pretended to write saddle in my notes. Later, I recorded his exact phrasing in a file I called Barnyard. The more I asked, the more he talked. Corey loved to hear his own voice. He'd narrate a grocery list if he thought someone might admire the verbs. He started CCing me on more emails too, evidence that I was in the loop, a phrase that became my favorite weapon. I saved everything locally and in a folder inside a folder called Q2 Expense Receipts, because Corey never opened things with boring names. I also printed out a handful of the worst exchanges and tucked them into a manila folder at the back of my desk drawer under a stack of blank onboarding W-4s. Paper still matters, especially when you suspect someone will start deleting when they smell smoke. Then there were the coaching moments. Corey would call me into a conference room for feedback, tilt his head, and ask me patronizing questions about whether I was feeling stretched. One afternoon, he said, I'm sensing resistance, Jules. You need to be a solutions person. You're not a cop. I widened my eyes and said, I just want to do whatever you do. It was true and also a prayer. At home, I kept a log. Dates, times, what he instructed, who was present, what I asked, what he answered. I included stupid details because later, stupid details are anchor points a liar can't recreate. What color marker he used on the whiteboard, which mug he was drinking from, whether he left early for his son's baseball game. I wasn't sure yet what my endgame was, HR, ethics hotline, the partner who'd once told me, we like people who make dust, not people who sneeze at it. But I knew I needed a record, even if the record was just for the version of me who would one day doubt her own memory. 2 weeks into my performance, the Thornwell CFO sent a chirpy email inviting us to the celebration of a successful year at their plant. Corey replied all, wouldn't miss it. Then he swiveled to me. Wear flats, he said. We'll be walking the floor. I'd never been to the plant. It was 2 hours outside the city, a squat gray building surrounded by shipping containers and the kind of parking lot where the lines are suggestions. Inside, it smelled like metal and soap. The CFO, a man whose warmth seemed carefully curated like his pocket square, led us through aisles of neatly stacked boxes. We really appreciate your partnership, he said, clasping Corey's shoulder with both hands. You've been steady, like a boat tied to a dock while the tide lies. In the warehouse, I noticed a row of pallets shrink-wrapped and labeled with a date that didn't make sense. Shipments supposedly sent 2 weeks prior. They were dusty in a way fresh goods aren't. I took a photo on my phone when nobody was looking, the same way you take photos of a sunset you know you'll need later to prove it was real. We stood in the CFO's office afterward, drinking bad coffee out of paper cups. Corey laughed too loudly at something I didn't hear. When the CFO left to take a quick call, Corey turned to me and said, "You see? Healthy business. Nothing to wring your hands about. We're in the relationship game, Jules, not the gotcha game." I looked at the framed photo of the CFO's family on the credenza. The kids were wearing matching polo shirts that made them look like interns. Something in my chest hardened like cooling sugar. As we drove back to the city, Corey asked me to draft a summary of impressions for leadership. "High level," he said. "No need to get into the weeds. Save your weeds for your own development." I nodded. "Should I mention the pallets in Bay 3 with the December labels?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Nah, internal logistics, not our business." "Okay," I said, and I did my best worried intern face. "Just want to make sure I'm aligning with your approach." He smiled at the windshield. "Good girl." The words hung in the car like bad perfume. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my back and watched the ceiling and thought about the number 72492, which was the difference between what Thornwell reported and what my gut said they shipped. My body felt like a tuning fork someone had hit and walked away from. At 2:13 a.m., I got out of bed, opened my laptop, and started a draft to the ethics hotline. I wrote the first line 3 times. "I believe we are complicit. I believe my manager is suppressing material concerns. I believe I'm losing my mind." I deleted all of them and closed the laptop. In the morning, Corey forwarded me an invite for a 1-1. Subject: growth chat. He loved to capitalize things that weren't capital. In the body: "Let's real talk where you're getting stuck." I stared at the screen until the letters fuzzed. Then I took a breath and decided that if I was going to pretend to be clueless, I was going to be artful about it. I was going to ask him to teach me exactly how to launder doubt. He walked in late with a smoothie and sat without apologizing. "Jules," he said, smiling like we were co-conspirators. "How are we feeling about Thornwell?" I widened my eyes. "A little lost," I said. "Can you walk me through our approach again, so I can put it in writing for my own learning?" He put the smoothie down and leaned back like a man settling into his favorite chair. "Of course," he said. "Let's talk strategy." I clicked my pen. In my drawer, the manila folder waited, fat with receipts. On my desktop, a draft email to the ethics hotline sat open, unnamed. In my chest, something that used to be fear rotated into resolve, clicking into place like a bolt. "Start from the top," I said, and hit record on my brain. Corey loved to talk about strategy. He called it zooming out, which was code for explaining something obvious in a way that makes me sound profound. "So here's the deal," he said, tapping his smoothie lid with one manicured finger. "Thornwell's a good client, but they're messy. Always have been. They overstate some things, understate others. It's like dating someone who lies about their age. You don't break up over it, you just learn to factor it in." I wrote that down word for word. Then in parentheses I wrote, "Analogy comparing fraud to dating," manager's words. He kept going. "Our job isn't to cry wolf every time we see a paw print. It's to keep the relationship intact while guiding them toward best practices." "Got it," I said softly. "So if I see an error, like say something that could mislead investors, I should," he smiled, "loop me in. Let me decide how it plays." "Got it," I said again. "You're the filter." He nodded like I'd just complimented him. Exactly. That's how it started. The catalog of sentences that would one day hang him. Every meeting, every call, I wrote down everything. And every time I acted confused, he doubled down on explaining himself. Like he couldn't resist showing off how clever he was at bending rules without breaking them. Within a few weeks, I had enough material to build a small monument of arrogance. But I didn't send anything yet, because timing was everything. If I went too early, he'd call it a misunderstanding. Too late, and he'd find a scapegoat. I needed him to leave fingerprints on everything before I opened the door. In June, the pressure started to mount. Thornwell was preparing for their audit. Corey began holding daily alignment meetings where he mostly just reminded us to speak with one voice. He also started delegating anything risky to me, emails to auditors, reconciliations, confirmations, then claiming he was mentoring me through autonomy. I noticed he'd stopped CCing leadership on our messages. That was my first clue that he was nervous. One afternoon, he called me into a private conference room and shut the door. "Jules," he said, tone suddenly friendly, You've been doing great, really. You've grown a lot. But I need you to be smart about this next phase. What do you mean? He leaned forward. You're going to get questions from the auditors. They'll ask about inventory discrepancies, cost reclassifications, maybe even the December adjustments. All you need to do is keep your answers high level. Don't drown them in detail. Details make people nervous. I tilted my head. So, if they ask about the December adjustments, I should, he smiled, say it's being reviewed internally. Even if it's not? Especially if it's not, he said. I paused long enough for the silence to grow teeth. Got it, I said finally. High level. When I left that meeting, I went straight to the break room, poured myself terrible coffee, and sent myself an email from my personal account titled Notes from Today's Coaching Session. Inside, I summarized every word he'd said. Then I attached one of my screenshots and a few of my handwritten notes. I didn't send it to anyone else, just saved it as a draft. It was my breadcrumb trail. The audit kicked off that Monday. I wore a cardigan with pockets deep enough to hide my shaking hands. The lead auditor, a woman named Melissa, had the kind of calm that made everyone else seem frantic. I liked her immediately. By the second day, she'd started asking real questions. Can you explain the Q4 reclass entries? She asked. I glanced at Corey, who was sitting 2 seats away. He nodded once. We're reviewing those internally, I said, voice even. Melissa's eyes flicked to Corey. When do you expect that review to be completed? He smiled. Soon. The next few days were a blur of numbers, explanations, and half-truths. Corey was good at it. He spun language like cotton candy, sweet and insubstantial. But Melissa wasn't buying it. I could tell by the way she kept circling back, always politely, always with a new angle. By Friday, she asked for direct access to the general ledger for certain dates. Corey deflected. We'll pull those reports for you, he said. She smiled. Actually, I'd prefer to run them myself. That night at 6:37 p.m., he called me. We need to clean up the GL access before Monday, he said. There are some test entries that'll confuse them. What kind of test entries? He hesitated. The kind that make things balanced. Nothing fraudulent, just smoothing. I didn't respond. I just said, okay, how do you want to handle it? I'll need you to delete a few batches, he said. I'll send you the list. My throat went dry. Shouldn't we archive them first? No need. They're placeholders. Right, I said. Placeholders. I hung up, opened my notes file, and typed 6-9, asked to delete ledger batches before audit access, list pending. Then I opened a fresh email, attached the notes, and saved it in drafts again. The next morning, he sent me the list. I didn't touch it. Instead, I printed it out, highlighted his email header, and slipped it into the manila folder. By Monday, the auditors were back. Corey was sweating in ways he tried to disguise as enthusiasm. When Melissa asked about specific journal entries that had mysteriously disappeared, he said, "Oh, we archive those regularly for system optimization." System optimization? She repeated. Standard practice, he said, forcing a laugh. I stared at my notepad. Should I pull the archive receipts? I asked innocently. Corey's head whipped toward me. Not necessary, he said quickly. Melissa tilted her head. Actually, that would be great. The room went still. Corey's jaw tightened. They're not accessible right now. Melissa smiled. Then I'll wait. That was the first crack I'd ever seen in him, a small tremor in his perfect script. Later that day, he pulled me into the stairwell. What the hell was that? He hissed. What was what? You undermined me in front of the audit team. I thought I was helping. Helping would be shutting up when adults are talking, he snapped. I blinked. Sorry, I must have misunderstood. You always tell me to be proactive. He rubbed his temple. Don't play cute with me, Jules. I'm not, I said softly. I'm just trying to learn. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, You know, sometimes I think you're smarter than you act. I smiled faintly. Sometimes I think you're right. That night I added the stairwell conversation to my notes. I didn't even bother pretending I wasn't keeping a record anymore. Not to myself. I knew exactly where this was headed. 2 days later, the auditors escalated their findings to the firm's risk committee. Corey looked pale when he walked into the morning meeting. "They're blowing this out of proportion," he said, pacing. "We'll manage the narrative." He looked at me then, expectant. "You'll back me up, right?" "Of course," I said. "I'll tell them everything you taught me." He smiled, relieved. "That's my girl." But the truth was already too big to hide. The risk committee requested all correspondence and reports between us and Thornwell. Everything, including deleted messages, including draft communications. Corey didn't know yet that I'd never deleted anything. That night, I got an email from Melissa, the auditor. "If you have concerns about your manager's conduct, my direct line is below. You can speak confidentially." I sat there staring at the screen, my hand hovering over the mouse. For months, I'd been pretending to be clueless. Now I had a choice to make: stay the fool or finally play my hand. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off, watching the glow from the city bleed across my ceiling. Melissa's email sat open on my laptop like an invitation I wasn't sure I deserved to accept. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. If I told the truth, Corey would drag me down with him. He'd say I'd been complicit, that I'd helped. He'd twist every question into a reflection of me, because that's what people like him do. They break mirrors so no one else can see themselves clearly. Around 3 a.m., I finally picked up my phone and called my brother. He answered on the third ring, groggy. "If this isn't about someone dying, I swear to God." "It's about a career dying," I said. He sighed. "So your boss?" "Yeah," I hesitated. "I think I have to turn him in." "You think?" "I've been keeping records, notes, screenshots, emails. If I give them everything, he's done." "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is he'll make sure I go down too. And even if I don't, the firm will never forget that I made a scene. No one likes the person who calls out the rot." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Sometimes the only way to clean a wound is to make it bleed." I leaned my head against the cold window pane. "You make it sound noble." "It's not noble," he said. "It's survival. Do what you have to do, Jules." When I hung up, I stared at Melissa's message again. Then I took a deep breath and started typing. "Hi, Melissa. Thank you for reaching out. I've been documenting concerns for several months. I have records that I believe demonstrate intentional misrepresentation of client data by my manager, Corey, last name. Please advise how best to share this information securely." I hovered over send for a long time. Then I clicked it. By morning, I had a response waiting. "Hi, Jules. Thank you for your courage in coming forward. Please attach any documentation you're comfortable sharing. I'll handle it from there. Confidentiality is guaranteed. I spent the entire day gathering everything: the manila folder from my desk, the screenshots, the email drafts, the notes. I zipped it into a single encrypted file and sent it to her through the firm's secure upload system. My hands were shaking the whole time. An hour later, she replied, "Received. We'll be in touch soon." That soon stretched into 3 days of agony. Corey was his usual smug self, walking around the office like nothing was happening. I kept my face neutral, my voice polite, my posture small. I smiled in meetings, nodded at his jokes, let him think I was still his loyal apprentice. Inside, though, I felt like a wire pulled too tight. On the fourth day, everything broke. It was a Thursday morning, right before the weekly status meeting. I just logged on when a calendar invite popped up for an urgent compliance review with HR and risk. Corey was on it too. When we walked into the conference room, there were 3 people already waiting: Melissa, the firm's compliance officer, and a partner I'd only seen in photos. The air felt heavy, like everyone had already decided how this would end. Corey still smiled. "Morning, all. What's this about?" The compliance officer folded her hands. "Corey, we've received some troubling information regarding the Thornwell engagement. We need to discuss your handling of several entries and your direction to staff." Corey blinked. "My direction to staff?" His eyes slid toward me. "You mean her?" Melissa spoke next, calm but precise. "We have documentation indicating you instructed your team to alter or delete records prior to audit review. We also have confirmation from Thornwell that certain reconciliations were falsified under your supervision." Corey laughed. "That's ridiculous. Who even said that?" I looked down at my notebook, pretending to fidget with my pen. He noticed. His tone shifted. Wait, are you saying she said that? The compliance officer didn't answer. Corey turned fully toward me now, disbelief melting into anger. Jules, come on. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I met his eyes for the first time. It's not a misunderstanding. The silence was so thick I could hear the hum of the projector. He barked a laugh. You've got to be kidding me. You? You're accusing me? After everything I've done for you? You told me to delete batches before the auditors had access, I said quietly. You told me not to document discrepancies. You told me to keep things high level. He stepped closer. You're twisting my words. I stood up slowly. I recorded your words, Corey. That stopped him cold. His jaw flexed, but nothing came out. Melissa cleared her throat. We'll need both of you to step out while we confer with leadership. Corey didn't move. He just stared at me like he was memorizing my face. Then he whispered, You really don't know what you've done. I didn't answer. I just walked out. They kept us waiting for over an hour in separate rooms. When the door finally opened, the partner walked in alone. He sat across from me and said, You did the right thing, Jules. It's going to take time, but we'll handle this. Is he? He's suspended pending investigation, the partner said, effective immediately. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. When I went back to my desk, his office was already being emptied. 2 HR reps were boxing up his framed certificates and novelty mugs. I stood there watching, numb. A few coworkers peeked over their monitors, whispering. One of them, Danny, leaned over and mouthed, What happened? I just shook my head. By the end of the day, everyone knew. The whispers spread like static. Words like audit breach, misconduct, termination. No one said my name out loud, but people looked at me differently. Some looked impressed, others looked scared. That night, I got an email from Melissa. Corey's been officially removed from all client engagements. I know this has been a lot. Thank you again for your integrity. Integrity. That word sat heavy in my chest. I thought it would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like stepping out of a burning building and realizing you'd lost everything inside. The following Monday, Corey was gone. His name was wiped from the team directory, his office door plaque removed, his Slack account deleted. All that remained were small ghosts. An empty coffee mug left behind, a Post-it stuck to the monitor that said, Circle back with legal, and a faint smell of his cologne that somehow lingered even after facilities did their deep clean. People whispered, of course, and they always do. Corporate gossip has a smell, burnt sugar and toner, and it clung to the office that week. No one said fired out loud, just he's no longer with the firm, or he's exploring new opportunities. But the way everyone kept glancing at me gave it away. I became radioactive. Some people avoided me completely, afraid my proximity to Corey's downfall might infect their careers. Others treated me like a hero, which was somehow worse. They'd lower their voices and say things like, Good for you, standing up for yourself, as if I'd staged some grand act of courage instead of just surviving a system that rewarded silence. HR made me sign more forms than I thought existed. Confidentiality agreements, compliance statements, non-retaliation acknowledgments. Each signature felt like sealing a door. A few days later, Melissa stopped by my desk. She was wearing a navy blazer and the kind of calm that makes everyone else straighten their posture. Got a minute? She asked. We sat in a glass conference room overlooking the city. She handed me a manila folder, thinner than I expected considering the storm it represented. Internal review concluded, she said. Corey's termination was justified. The partner group wanted me to thank you personally. I looked at the folder, but didn't open it. So? It's over? On paper, yes, she said. But I want you to know, these things ripple. He won't be the last person affected. Ripple? I asked, frowning. She hesitated. People who were close to him, his projects, his contacts. There'll be audits, client questions, fallout. I nodded slowly. And me? She smiled a little, but her eyes didn't soften. You'll be fine. Eventually. Eventually. The corporate synonym for maybe never. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at work shifted in strange, quiet ways. Leadership sent out a company-wide email emphasizing integrity and transparency. They called it a refocusing initiative. A few directors started copying me on high-level correspondence. Performative transparency, like they wanted me to be their moral mascot. But underneath all that polished language, the ground felt unstable. My teammates started tiptoeing around me. In meetings, people avoided eye contact when sensitive topics came up. I caught snippets of conversations cut short when I entered the room. "Don't say that, Jules is here," someone once muttered, and everyone laughed awkwardly. It's strange becoming both invisible and too visible at once. One afternoon, Danny, the only coworker who still treated me normally, leaned over my desk. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Just tired." "Yeah, well," she said, lowering her voice. "They're already replacing him." "Corey?" She nodded. "Rumor is they're bringing someone from corporate HQ. Some big-shot director who's obsessed with process control." I tried to act neutral. "That's probably a good thing." "Probably," she said, but her tone carried a warning. "You know how these things go. New boss, new agenda. Just keep your head down." I smiled faintly. That's the plan. But when the new boss arrived the following week, keeping my head down became harder than ever. Her name was Evelyn Chen, mid-40s, sharp as glass, polite in that way people are when they've been told politeness is optional. Her first day, she called me into her office before I'd even finished my morning coffee. "Juliana," she said, gesturing for me to sit, "I've read your file." That sentence alone was enough to make my stomach drop. "Your work is strong," she continued, "methodical, clean. And I know you were involved in the Corey situation." I swallowed. "I did what I thought was right." "I'm sure you did," she said, folding her hands. "And that's exactly why I need your help." I blinked. "My help?" She nodded. "We're going to clean up the Thornwell engagement, top to bottom. Everything he touched. I want you to lead the internal review." My heart stuttered. "You want me to lead it?" "Yes," she said simply. "You know the history better than anyone. You know where the skeletons are." I sat there for a moment, stunned. Part of me felt vindicated. This was trust, recognition. But another part of me felt dread creeping up my spine. Leading an internal review meant stepping right back into the same mess I'd barely escaped from. It meant walking the line between whistleblower and scapegoat. "I'll do my best," I said finally. Evelyn smiled, sharp and small. "Good. That's all I ask." The following weeks were chaos again, but this time I was the one holding the flashlight. I dug through Corey's archives, reviewed every reconciliation, every email chain, every adjustment. I met with Thornwell's CFO, who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "We trusted him," he told me. "He said he was helping us." "I know," I said quietly. "He said the same thing to me." By the end of the review, we found nearly $500,000 in misstated assets. Nothing catastrophic for the firm, but enough to trigger another external audit and an internal overhaul of policies. Evelyn handled it with ruthless efficiency, firing 2 more managers, reshuffling teams, rewriting entire protocols. Through it all, she kept saying, "We owe you for catching this." But the truth was, I wasn't sure I'd caught anything. It felt more like I'd simply been standing too close when it all exploded. When the dust finally settled, she called me back into her office. "You did good work, Juliana," she said. "You should be proud." "Thank you," I said, though the words felt hollow. She smiled faintly. "We're recommending you for promotion to senior associate, effective next quarter." I blinked. "Seriously? You earned it." That night I went home and opened a bottle of cheap wine. I should have felt victorious. But instead I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window and wondered when exactly doing the right thing had started to feel like guilt. I told myself I'd stop thinking about Corey, stop replaying the last time he'd looked at me, that quiet venom in his voice. "You don't know what you've done." But 2 weeks later, an email arrived in my inbox that made my hands go cold. It was from a personal Gmail account. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. "Hope the promotion was worth it." I must have read that line 50 times before I could even breathe. Hope the promotion was worth it. It didn't say his name, but it didn't need to. The rhythm of the words, the deliberate venom wrapped in politeness. It was Corey's voice. I could hear it. For a long time, I just sat there, frozen at my desk, listening to the office hum around me. Printers whirring, phones ringing, people laughing about things that didn't matter. Meanwhile, my stomach was sinking into itself. I checked the sender address again. It was a generic Gmail, nothing identifiable, just a string of numbers and letters. But the way it was phrased, that taunting familiarity, told me everything I needed to know. He was still out there watching. I debated deleting it, pretending I hadn't seen it. But pretending had already cost me enough. So I forwarded it to Evelyn with just one line. Received this from an unverified address. Likely Corey. She replied within minutes. Got it. I'll escalate to IT and legal. Thank you for flagging. Professional, crisp, like it was just another Tuesday problem. I should have felt reassured. Instead, I felt sick. That night, when I got home, I found myself replaying every moment since his firing. Every door that had clicked behind me, every stranger's glance in the subway, every block number that had called once and hung up. My mind twisted ordinary details into patterns. Paranoia is just logic that's been left out in the rain too long. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself I was imagining things. People get bitter when they lose their jobs. He probably just wanted to scare me. He couldn't touch me anymore. Then the second email came. This one had a subject line. It said, "You always like playing dumb." No message, just an attachment. My pulse spiked. I didn't open it. I forwarded it straight to Evelyn again. Her reply this time came after an hour. It's investigating. Do not respond or open attachments. We're alerting security. I stared at that message for a long time before locking my laptop and going for a walk. I must have wandered for blocks without realizing it. The city blurred around me. Horns, footsteps, snippets of conversations that didn't feel real. I kept thinking, you always like playing dumb. It was supposed to be my weapon, my survival strategy. But now it felt like an accusation. When I got back to the office, Evelyn was waiting near my desk. She motioned toward the conference room. Inside, she shut the door and said, "We traced the email. It came from a public library computer downtown. No sign of further access attempts, but legal's filing a restraining complaint just in case." I nodded, too numb to speak. She studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said. "Jules, I know this is hard, but you did the right thing. He's lashing out because he knows he can't touch you professionally." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "He doesn't care about professionally anymore." She didn't argue, just said, "Take a few days off. I'll handle things here." So I did. For the first time in months, I let myself stop. I stayed home, slept late, cooked real meals. I tried not to check my email, though I failed a dozen times. Nothing new came in. No more messages, no calls. By the third night, the tension in my shoulders had started to fade. Then on the fourth morning, I opened my front door and froze. There was an envelope on my welcome mat. No postage, no address. Just my name, written in neat, looping handwriting I recognized immediately. Corey. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at it. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of someone's air conditioner. When I finally picked it up, my hands were shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. "Congratulations on your promotion. You learned fast. Just remember, they only love you while you're useful. The moment you stop performing, they'll eat you too." See? That was it. No threats, no demands. Just poison disguised as advice. I reported it immediately. Security reviewed the cameras but didn't find anything useful. The angle of the hallway left a blind spot near my door. Evelyn insisted on arranging a temporary security detail, and legal pushed for a no-contact order. But the damage wasn't physical. It was psychological, the kind that seeps in slowly. Every knock after that made me flinch. Every unknown number made my pulse spike. Even after weeks passed without another incident, the fear stayed. Not sharp, but dull and constant, like background noise you can't turn off. Work, though, didn't stop. It never does. By August, the firm had moved on. Thornwell had replaced their CFO. The reports had been fixed. The press releases had spun it as proactive oversight. Evelyn's team, my team now, was being praised for upholding the firm's values. I was on track for another promotion before year's end, but I couldn't shake Corey's words. They only love you while you're useful. Every time someone congratulated me, it echoed. When a partner stopped by my desk to say, "You're doing great work," I heard, "For now." That kind of paranoia eats at you quietly. It doesn't shout, it whispers. One night I stayed late finishing a report. The office was nearly empty, just the hum of computers and the distant whir of the cleaning crew. When I finally stood to leave, I saw something taped to my monitor. A post-it note, blank except for 3 words scrawled in black pen. "Miss me yet?" I froze. My throat went dry. I tore it off and looked around the office. Empty, silent. My hands were trembling again, just like they had that first day I decided to act clueless. I walked straight to Evelyn's office and showed her the note. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, "We'll review the security footage." But I could see it in her eyes. The doubt, the same kind people used to give me before Corey fell. "What if you put it there yourself?" they'd whisper later, when they thought I couldn't hear. You know, stress. The next day, HR called me in for a check-in. The tone was gentle, too gentle. They asked how I was sleeping, whether I'd processed everything that happened, whether I might need some time away. By the end of the meeting, I realized what was happening. I wasn't the whistleblower anymore. I was a liability. Corey's words came back again, cold and precise. "They'll eat you too." That night I packed a box. Not a dramatic quitting moment, just quiet, methodical packing. My mug, my notebook. The pen I'd used to write every single note about him. I left the office key on my desk and walked out without saying goodbye. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. But even now, months later, I still check my email twice before bed. I still glance over my shoulder in crowded places. And sometimes when I open my laptop, I think I see the ghost of a draft email. One that starts the same way as the one I wrote all those months ago. I believe my manager is suppressing material concerns. Only now, the name is mine. I didn't plan to quit without a backup plan. I'd always been the type to play things safe, track every expense, map out contingencies, color code possibilities. But walking out that night, the hum of the building fading behind me, I felt strangely calm. Like the worst part of the storm had passed and what remained was just wreckage. The next morning, I woke up late for the first time in years. No alarm, no emails, no polite good mornings on Slack. I made coffee, sat on my couch, and stared out the window while it rained. It should have felt like freedom. It didn't. Every sound outside, the elevator door down the hall, the scrape of someone unlocking their bike, made my heart tighten. I kept expecting another envelope to appear, another email, another reminder that I'd made enemies by simply doing the right thing. For the first week, I told myself I was just decompressing. The second week, it felt more like hiding. My phone buzzed constantly. Recruiters, co-workers checking in, HR leaving one last message about transition documentation. I ignored them all. One afternoon, Danny texted, "You okay? Evelyn said you took a leave. Everyone's asking." I started to type back, "I'm fine," but deleted it. I didn't know what fine even meant anymore. Instead, I just wrote, "I needed quiet." She replied, "You deserve better than that place." That made me cry unexpectedly. Not big sobs, just the kind of tears that show up when someone says the one true thing you hadn't admitted to yourself yet. A few days later, a brown envelope arrived in my mail. I froze when I saw it. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar this time. The return address was the firm. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a short note on official letterhead. "Juliana, this is to confirm your voluntary resignation and final payout. Thank you for your contributions to Ashford and Leeds. We wish you the best." No signature, just HR department. At the bottom was a typed addendum. "Please note, internal investigation regarding breach of confidentiality remains ongoing. You may be contacted for follow-up." I read that line again and again. Breach of confidentiality. So now I was the suspect. I called Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. Her voice clipped. "Jewel, I was hoping you'd call." "What investigation?" I demanded. She sighed. Someone leaked internal details about the Thornwell audit to the press. They're looking into who might have had access to those files. And you think it's me? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Her silence was answer enough. I laughed, sharp, humorless. You think I'd risk everything for a headline? After what I've already been through? Jules, she said gently, I believe you. But legal needs to close the loop. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night I found the news article she was talking about. It was short, buried halfway down the business section. Sources within Ashford and Leeds confirmed discrepancies in Thornwell audit findings. Anonymous quotes. No names, no big revelations. Just enough to embarrass the firm. The comments section called the whistleblower a hero. I stared at the screen for a long time, wondering if this was what Corey had meant. They'll eat you too. Maybe he hadn't been threatening me. Maybe he'd just been telling me the rules of the game. Over the next few weeks, the calls from legal started. Polite at first, then firmer. We'd appreciate your cooperation. Please confirm when you can make time for an interview. I ignored them all. Eventually, they stopped calling. I started freelancing again. Small consulting gigs, remote work, nothing tied to a firm. The anonymity felt safe. I didn't use my last name on professional profiles. I rented a co-working desk in a building full of strangers. I told no one where I lived. For a while, it worked. Then one night in December, I came home to find a single flash drive sitting on my doormat. No envelope this time. Just the drive, plain and silver, with a sticky note on it that said, "Play me." Every rational part of me screamed not to. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It doesn't shout, it whispers. I plugged it into an old laptop, one not connected to anything. There was one file inside, video MP4. I clicked it. At first, the screen was black, then a faint hum, like fluorescent lights flickering on. The camera steadied on a man's face. Corey. He looked older, gaunt. His once perfect hair was longer, streaked with gray. He was sitting somewhere bare, maybe a motel room. "Hi, Jules," he said softly. My throat went dry. "I heard they're after you now. Figures." He gave a small, bitter smile. "That place eats its own. You were naive to think you'd be different." He leaned closer to the camera. "You know what the funniest part is? You did everything right. Documented, reported, played by their rules, and they still turned on you." He paused, studying the lens. "You were never my enemy. You were just the one smart enough to see me coming. And that's why they'll never forgive you." The video ended, just like that. I sat there staring at the frozen frame of his face until the laptop screen dimmed. Then I ejected the drive, dropped it into a glass of water, and watched it die with a hiss. After that, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the way he'd said, "They'll never forgive you," like it was both a curse and a promise. Weeks passed. I got another job offer from a small independent firm that wanted to bring integrity back into the field. I almost laughed when I read that line. Integrity doesn't bring you peace. It just makes enemies. But I accepted anyway, because I had to start somewhere. On my first day, the new manager, an older woman named Anita, showed me to my desk. "We're lucky to have you," she said warmly. "Your reputation precedes you." I smiled politely, trying not to flinch at that word. When she left, I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank desktop for a long moment. Then out of instinct, I created a new folder. I named it Receipts. Old habits die hard. For the first few months at the new firm, things were quiet, almost eerily so. I worked from a modest cubicle with real plants instead of fake ones, the kind that droop a little when you forget to water them. The office culture was gentler, slower, and no one seemed in a rush to circle back or align deliverables. People actually said things like, "Take your time," and seemed to mean it. Anita, my new boss, was everything Corey wasn't. Calm, practical, allergic to buzzwords. She wore flat shoes and no makeup, and she'd been doing this job longer than I'd been alive. She treated accounting the way monks treat prayer, repetitive, unglamorous, but sacred in its own way. The first week, she called me into her office and said, "You're known for speaking up when something doesn't look right. Don't lose that." I smiled, though the words hit differently now. Speaking up had nearly destroyed me once, but still, I nodded. "I won't." Most days passed uneventfully. I came in, worked quietly, went home. No politics, no manipulation, no whispers. My anxiety began to dull, though it never really went away. It sat at the base of my spine like static, humming faintly, waiting. Then one afternoon in February, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Juliana, the voice said when I picked up. A woman's voice, firm, professional. This is Detective Mendez with the State Financial Crimes Unit. My heart stuttered. I'm sorry, what is this about? It's about Corey Lang, she said. I froze. What about him? He's dead. The room tilted slightly. What? He was found in a motel outside Greenville 2 days ago. No foul play suspected. Appears to be suicide. We found several notes and recordings. I swallowed hard. Why are you calling me? One of the notes had your name on it, she said gently. You're listed as the person who understood him best. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The detective continued. We're sorting through evidence. He left behind multiple flash drives and files related to Ashford and Leeds. Some of them contain internal communications implicating other staff in the Thornwell fraud. You might want to know, you were right to come forward. I pressed my hand to my forehead. Are you saying he confessed? Something like that, she said. He named others, detailed how they pressured him, said he wasn't acting alone. A long pause followed. He wanted me to know that? I asked quietly. It seems so, she said. We'll be closing the case soon, but you might be contacted by the firm or the press once this goes public. Okay, I said, my voice barely there. After she hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at nothing. I thought about that last video he'd sent me. The hollow look in his eyes, the way he'd said, they'll never forgive you. And I realized maybe he hadn't been warning me. Maybe he'd been warning himself. That evening, Anita noticed something was off. She stopped by my desk as I was packing up. You look like you saw a ghost, she said. Something like that, I murmured. I told her everything. The calls, the messages, the flash drive, and now the detective. When I finished, she just sighed. You've carried a lot alone, she said. You don't have to anymore. The next week, the news broke. Ex-Ashford and Leeds manager found dead amid new accounting scandal. The article spread fast. Corey's confession had blown the lid off the firm. Turns out the rot went higher than anyone thought. Partners, directors, even someone in legal, all part of the cover-up. Within days, the firm's stock plummeted and investigations multiplied. I got calls from reporters, compliance officers, even people from the SEC. Most I ignored, but I did take one call. From Melissa, the auditor who had first reached out months ago. I heard, she said quietly. How are you holding up? I don't even know, I admitted. It feels like everything's burning again, just farther away this time. You did the right thing, she said. You always did. Her words were kind, but they didn't land. The truth was, I didn't feel righteous or vindicated. I just felt tired. The fallout stretched for months. Lawsuits, settlements, people resigning in droves. And somehow, in the middle of it all, I kept working quietly in my small cubicle under soft fluorescent light, balancing spreadsheets while the rest of the world caught fire. Then one evening in late spring, Anita called me into her office again. She handed me a printed email. It was from the state attorney's office. They were closing the Thornwell case. My name was mentioned in the report, not as a suspect, not as a witness, but as the initial whistleblower whose actions enabled the discovery of widespread misconduct. Anita smiled faintly. That's legacy work, she said. Legacy, I repeated. The word didn't feel real. She nodded. You can finally stop looking over your shoulder. But that night, when I walked home through the quiet streets, I caught my reflection in a store window and froze. For a split second, I thought I saw someone behind me. A tall shape, familiar posture. My breath caught. I turned quickly. No one was there. Just my own shadow stretching down the sidewalk. I laughed, then exhaled shakily. You're gone, I whispered under my breath. You're gone. But even as I said it, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder one more time, just to be sure. Weeks passed. The city began to soften again. The sirens, the deadlines, the endless chatter of headlines. It all receded into background noise. For the first time in what felt like years, I could walk through the world without flinching at every sudden sound. Still, something in me had changed permanently. I moved slower, spoke less, and trusted even fewer people. It wasn't cynicism so much as recalibration. I'd learned the hard way that truth doesn't save you. It just clears the fog long enough for you to see who's really standing beside you. Anita noticed it too. One morning she said, "You've got that look people get when they've been through the fire. I've seen it before. It doesn't go away completely, but it gets quieter." And she was right. The quiet grew, little by little. My work at the new firm started to matter again, not in the way it had at Ashford and Leeds, where matter meant billable. Here it meant something closer to trust. Clients who looked you in the eye, colleagues who said thank you instead of let's circle back. I even started mentoring a few younger analysts. One of them, a girl named Rena, reminded me a lot of myself when I first started. Too smart for her own good, too eager to prove it. One afternoon, she came into my office with a spreadsheet full of discrepancies and a nervous look on her face. "I think someone's double counting revenue," she said quietly. "Should I tell Anita?" For a moment, I just stared at her. Her earnestness, her anxiety, that hunger to do the right thing. It was like looking in a mirror from 5 years ago. "Yes," I said finally. "Tell her. Don't wait." Her shoulders relaxed. "You're sure?" I smiled, a small one. "I'm sure. And document everything." She grinned, not realizing the weight behind that advice. After she left, I sat alone for a while, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. I thought about all the times I'd been told to keep quiet, to stay in line, to let things slide. How much pretending it had taken just to survive. But then I thought of Melissa and Anita, and even my brother who'd told me once, sometimes the only way to clean a wound is to make it bleed. He was right. That weekend I took a trip out of the city. Just me, a rental car, and an old highway that smelled like rain. I ended up at a lake I hadn't seen since childhood. A quiet, mirror-flat place surrounded by pine trees. I sat on the dock with my shoes off, feet dangling in the water, watching the sunlight ripple. For the first time, I let myself feel everything. The fear, the guilt, the anger, the grief. All the things I'd buried under professionalism and polite emails. It came out in waves. Not pretty, but honest. When the tears finally stopped, I took out my phone and scrolled to an old draft I'd never deleted. The one that started with, "I believe my manager is suppressing material concerns." It had been sitting there for over a year, untouched. I opened it, read it again, and then added one last line at the bottom. "I believe I was right to speak up." Then I hit save, not send, and closed it for good. When I got home that evening, I found a letter waiting in my mailbox. For a split second, my heart stuttered, the old fear reawakening. But this envelope had a return address, the State Financial Crimes Unit. Inside was a single page. Final notice: the investigation into Ashford and Leeds and associated personnel is now closed. Your cooperation and documentation were instrumental in identifying systemic misconduct. Thank you for your integrity and persistence. No signatures, just an embossed seal at the bottom. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, right next to a photo of my parents and a grocery list. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The truth can break you, but silence rots you from the inside out. Sometimes I still think about Corey. Not with anger anymore, just with a strange, detached pity. He was a man who thought control was the same as power, that if he could twist people, he could stay untouchable. But in the end, he was just as human as the rest of us. I don't know if he meant for his last words to haunt me, but they don't anymore. If anything, they've become a kind of warning I keep close, a reminder of how easy it is to lose yourself in someone else's story. These days, when I walk into the office and see my team hunched over their monitors, laughing quietly about deadlines or debating who has the best snacks, I feel something I didn't expect to find again. Peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from surviving. One afternoon, Rena stuck her head into my office again, smiling nervously. "Anita said I should shadow you more often," she said. "She said you've got good instincts." I laughed. She said that? Yeah, she said you see things other people miss. I thought about that for a second. Then I said, let's hope that's true. Later that day, as I was packing up to leave, I caught my reflection in the dark monitor. Tired eyes, a faint scar of stress lines, but steadier now. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I'd earned my own peace. Because maybe that's what justice really is. Not the punishment, not the headlines, but the quiet certainty that you told the truth, even when it nearly broke you. And that's enough.